Okay, well, everybody seems to be going electric. Electric cars, electric bikes, electric scooters, all that kind of stuff. Now, those small, lightweight electric vehicles, the problems are not so, well, problematic. The batteries are small, easily replaceable, and relatively cheap, a few £100 at the most. Now, electric cars, on the other hand, the batteries are massive, several thousand cells, be it 18650, 21700s, or prismatic cells. Of course, the larger prismatic cells, you need less of them, but overall, it's still the same problem. The battery. Let's say, your average lithium-ion battery, well, I say average, your best lithium-ion batteries are going to last around 5 to 8 years. That's if you look after them. If you push these things hard, you're going to kill them within 2 years. Look at mobile phone batteries as an example. Look at laptop batteries. Look at every single device you've ever owned that uses a lithium-ion battery. That is the sad truth. We really haven't, although we have made the cells bigger, the actual chemistry hasn't really evolved much since around 2016, 2017. 18650s being a maximum of 3,600 milliamps. It's not just the capacity that's the issue. I mean, the range could be relatively reasonable for most people's needs. But if you're doing really long road trips, I say most people's needs within the UK. If you're in Australia and you've got to do a 1,000-mile road trip, you can pretty much forget about it. There's just no way an electric car or any electric vehicle for that matter would really be suitable for that kind of environment. The UK is relatively small, so it's not as impossible. It's still not great. You couldn't really go from, say, Houston to Glastonbury and back, very easily. You'd have to stop off to charge it midway, and obviously you'd have to find a charger, leave it there several hours, and then come back, and do it that way. It's a bit of a pain. But the biggest problem I'm talking about here is the lifespan of the battery and the replacement cost of the battery. And you're probably thinking, well, if you lease the car, it's nice and cheap. Yeah, for the moment, it might be. People haven't realised yet that this is an issue. You've just started to see a few YouTube videos pop up of people blowing up their electric car with dynamite because the battery is £22,000 to replace and the car's worth like £30,000. And that's not just that one. That wasn't even the company involved. Wasn't even making a profit on that battery. That was literally the more or less at cost replacement cost of the battery. It's not because they were ripping off the customer. It's because these batteries are expensive. There's a lot of copper in these batteries. There's a lot of aluminium in these batteries. The chemistry they're not cheap. I mean, the individual cells are not that expensive, but when you've got a lot of them, that price comes up. Then obviously you've got the battery management systems. You've got all that kind of stuff. The cooling system, all of that stuff for it. I mean, one way we could make it better, but it would still be expensive, but it would guarantee support in the future, is if there was a modular battery standard made for electric vehicles that meant, say, bigger vehicles, so they all slide in like a blade server. So each module has a certain amount of cells in it, and obviously not necessarily a certain amount of capacity, a certain amount of cells and a certain form factor. But obviously, as technology progresses, if it progresses much more, you will be able to change out that module. And as chemistries come along, hopefully you'd be able to have a software update for the BMS that might need to change if you go from, say, a normal lithium cell that's 4.2 volts or 4.1 volts in the case of some Samsung cells. The some cells are 4.3 volts these days, so you're going to need to update the software to accommodate that. With future technologies and things like that. So if it was a modular system where you could replace the battery easily, then it would be better, but it's still a very expensive item. Your average car that's 10 years old really isn't worth £22,000, nowhere near. And it might be the point where a replacement battery simply is no longer available for that vehicle. That is the case with certain electric vehicles now, that you cannot get a battery. And that's the end of it. Well, with Tesla, you can. But I think it was Chevy or General Motors, one of the General Motors electric vehicles, you could not buy a battery. Lewis Rossman done a video on that. And it wasn't even that old. It was from like 2016. So that's pretty dire, really. And then with the fact is, your electric car lasts 10 years. You throw it away. You've got to deal with disposing of all the plastics. It's basically e-waste. You've got to deal with the plastics, all that kind of stuff, any of the metals. there's a lot of toxic stuff in there you have to deal with. I mean, there is with a regular car, but there's lots of regular cars on the road with internal combustion engines that are well over 15, 20 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, even some of the classics. But they didn't need a £22,000 battery at any point. When it gets to that sort of price, people are going to be like, well, I can get a loan for a new car. I can't get a loan for a battery, and it's not worth doing, so I'm going to buy a new car. You're going to throw the old car away. And the fact is, that's creating more stuff for landfill. It's creating jobs, which is my theory about what the government wants people to replace their car every 10 years, because then they get the value-added tax from that. It employs people. It's good for the economy in that sense, but it's not good for the people that can't afford to buy the new car, and it's not good for the environment. Right, that concludes the video on this subject, electric cars, and why I think they are a terrible idea. Electric bikes, electric scooters, small stuff like that, totally fine, although I do believe manufacturers should offer batteries for longer than they currently do on a lot of them. But there is generally some electronics guy down the road that knows a thing or two about electric bikes, and they're able to help you out. So if you have an electric bike that has a fault with the battery, someone can rebuild that battery for you, and you can be on your way. Thank you for watching this video. Like and subscribe. See you later.